Hey guys, welcome to the bonus episode of the B-side. We got Andy back here. Jay had to go. He had to go do
Take care of his
father.
kids.
Yeah. Oh wow, crazy.
Oh,
But
man.
we are blessed to have Andy back with us today. So wanted to continue into a new discussion, Andy. And for those of you who don't know, Andy has been part of KCPC, CCPC as kind of when they were more closely
When it was still like
together, right?
KCPC,
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
And for the past, what, like 40 years maybe, even 35? Past a long time, right?
Like, why you have to put a number on it?
Sure, yeah. You're what, like 25, something like that? Yeah. No, but so, and you've been here for such a long time. At least you've seen CCPC from eyes length or hands length distance away, right? So what are some things you've noticed over the years that have changed, and maybe some things that have stayed the same throughout those times?
Right. I think, kind of coming from being at CCPC right out of high school, right? Like, again, when it was still kind of KCPC EM, the things I think what I saw back then, it would obviously be really different in the sense of like, it's now been about 20 years since, we were in that stage of like church. For me, a lot's changed, in terms of just the vision of the church. I think has been something that's definitely changed in the sense of like, I still remember like back then. I mean, it was a simple vision, right? I remember distinctly, like, I think the KCPCM vision was like to know God and to make him known. And to be honest, I don't know what the vision is. That's not a statement, but I literally just don't know. But I think what I've seen kind of change, yes, people have come and gone, but I think the community has been pretty consistent in the sense of like, I think for me, it still feels like, I know we're a pretty big church, but it's still, at least to me, it still feels like a small church. It still feels like what we were when we were, still at the old KCPC,
Vienna campus,
hanging out in the balcony. And I still get that. And, part of that is not necessarily from anyone else. I feel like that's, I feel like that's part of the responsibility of, right, our community as an individual, myself, like being a part of it and making it feel like less corporate than you would think from like a very large church. And I'm sure not a lot of people necessarily think like that of CCPC, right? But to me, I still feel, I feel like an adult here as well, but I still feel like I'm 20 here, right? There's so many people,
but you're
here.
Not.
Right? It's only been 5 years,
yeah.
Right? But like, I think for me, the thing that I love is still feeling like I'm like early on, right? Like I still feel like I'm like in my early 20s or in high school. Sometimes I'm in this community being cared for. And at the same time, I get to be that for other people in this community as well, right? And so for me, that cycle is something that has not changed. And I say that obviously in a very positive way. And I think that that's more because of just what I learned growing up here. I think, again, we had such really great, for me at least, like older brothers and sisters who invested in me, not directly per se, but like just even from being around. And I was able to glean a lot of wisdom and a lot of how to be a part of a community and a part of a team. That's something I learned from CCPC and Coach K.
Bringing it back.
But I think for me that's right. Like for me, that's the most beautiful part of this church, is that as big as we are, relatively, like we can still make it feel very small.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that over the years, kind of the soul feels the same. I'm wondering, what do you think makes it so that the soul feels the same? Because it must be some part of the people, but if you think about it, what CCPC looks like now versus 30 years ago, I'm sure is almost like 90% different, right?
Right.
So what do you think causes this mentality or soul, I guess, of the church to maintain?
Again, I think it's based on the foundation of like this still being about like the community, and we could say that's about any church, right? Like there are people who've come and gone and been hurt or whatever, and not to minimize that, but it's like, man, like I can only speak personally in the sense of like it wasn't like there were so many people who came and like were just like nice to me for the sake of being nice,
Sure.
right? Like I'm not sure that it works that way, but for me, I think the soul came from the fact that like there were so many people who were willing to love on people, and
Mm.
even if it were just one or two people, like for me, I was able to glean from that and be able to like feel like, oh, like I'm loved, and through that I was able to reciprocate,
Mm.
and um, it became a cycle of that for again for myself of like serving the youth
Right.
or taking part in different like parts of the community, and so yeah, there obviously there isn't anyone that's probably been there like since the beginning, but for me, I think the spirit lies in obviously the spirit of community that we have here, and kind of going off of it, like actually doing something about it, like having seen like people invest, like I understand now, like, okay, like it's not just about like taking it in, but
Mm-hmm.
seeing it, like seeing the fruits by going and kind of reciprocating that with others.
Sure.
Right.
So is the reason why you joined youth because you had a positive youth experience as well, or is it different?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think for me, like the youth side was so different than what it is now,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like the
I
the,
can
the
imagine.
KCPC side was so different. Um, but I think being able to, yeah, kind of like what I was saying before of just being like getting to be someone in their life that I wanted or needed when I
Mm.
was that
Mm.
age, is always something that like I want to dig into, and like I feel like that's what part of my um just like that's what my heart is
Sure.
for,
Yeah.
right? Like because I feel like, man, those years were so like formative for the foundation of where I am in terms of like my faith,
Mm-hmm.
where I am in terms of just who I am as an adult now. Not to say like I'm just like this great amazing person, but even in spite of a lot of flaws of who I am, like I get to still be a vessel more
Mm.
than simply like someone that should be looked up to or something. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
so for me, it's like, again, this aspect of team of like, hey, like, yeah, like it's like, hey, like in a sports team or basketball team, like someone may not be a great shooter or someone's not just good at some roles,
Mm-hmm.
but they are good in other parts, right? They
Mm-hmm.
hustle or they can
Mm-hmm.
do something, rebound or whatever. In that same way, I come with like knowing, hey, like I'm not great at a lot of things. I'm not necessarily a
Mm.
great person or a good person, but at the same time, like, I'm allowed to be this vessel. I'm
Sure.
still
Sure.
allowed to be a part of this um, and grow from it and learn as well as, hey, like, especially for youth, right? Like we're investing in our future community, right? Like
Right.
we're investing in people who will be like perhaps in our CG one day or journey group or whatever, and um, to be able to be a part of that is something that's so beautiful
Sure,
for me.
definitely, definitely. What are some ways you think you manifest that into your relationship with your youth students and just like things that you're doing to help show that to them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, I think just again, trying to again, think of it as like, hey, this is my community, right? Like they're not just
Like some
like
student.
students,
Yeah.
right? They're like, hey, like we're all part of this
Right.
church. And I think approaching it like that has been something that's helped me, um, again, understand like that's all we want, right? Like we want this community. We want this community to grow. We want this community to be like something sustainable, and to be a part of that simply by like being there,
Sure.
right? And like just being someone to them,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and trusting in, right, the message more than the messengers, right? Like for me has always been part of like I just want to be a part of that. Like I
Sure.
just want to be
Yeah.
a part of the team,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to do that on a weekly basis, again, in spite of, who am I, right? Like is always humbling. It's always, and it's like it's what makes sense of like what this kingdom building thing
Sure.
is, right? Like because again, if we were only able to serve youth, for instance, being just perfect and being just great human beings,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously I am not at all, um, then nothing would get done.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's always just this idea of like show up, be there. Has always been like, because people showed up from, like
Yeah.
like people showed up in my life, and I saw that, and I was able to be a part of this community now for
Yeah.
30 years, and if we can do that, like even for someone that's just been here for a long time, like if we can do that for the future college kids and community, like then why not,
Sure.
and so for me that's been kind of a driving force.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I see at CCPC that we start to struggle in, honestly, is as we get older, past Bridges age, it gets harder to get that or the pouring out relationship
Yeah.
into us, right? So like, but when we were in youth group, we had the Bridges age people to pour into us. How do you think we should be better ministering to, the late 20s, early 30s, 40s, single, married, in a way that kind of matches your philosophy that you're saying for the youth, and a whole church aspect?
Man. I think like I've always been under this philosophy of like just show up, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
be there, like take part in just
Mm.
like each other's lives,
Sure.
right? Like I think as you get older, I'm, almost 40, and I'm not married, I don't have kids, and there's not many people like that at this age anymore, right?
Right.
I can think of maybe 2 or 3 people like my age. Versus like, like it's easy when you're in your 20s, everyone's not married and everyone's like kind of single and whatever. But like, for instance, Jay's one of my closest friends, married, 2 kids. And so I don't really get to see him too much. But at the same time, it's like we should, just show up, be in each other's lives.
Right.
Like, and not, I think part of it is like, if you're not like, you can't just wait for like things to come your way, right? Like you can't expect, like, I think all the pastors say it all the time, is like, don't expect them to be your best friend. If you're looking for a best friend or you're looking for a friend, go out into this community and, be a part of it and trust that, again, trust in the message, right? Like trust in that, like this community, if it's centered on the things that it's supposed to be centered on,
Sure.
like you're going to have something to connect on and grow with, right? Like, me and Jay, for instance, we didn't necessarily immediately connect on basketball, right? Like our connection was the youth group, our church, right? Like, and through that we found out all these other things. But I would be able to say like, all right, like Jay is a prime example of like how I feel like our communities can grow, right? Like
Mhm.
Jay came into our youth group new, like he
Sure.
came in like 10th grade. So we had already had like some established
Right.
friends,
Right.
like, and those kind of things. But Jay, like, he just kept showing up.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's like, we're like 10th grade. We're not nice to anybody like that. Right. But in spite of that, like we got connected because of the community, right? Like
Mhm.
he kept showing up and his personality is so different from mine or
Sure.
like our other friends. Right. But at the same time, it's like you realize like, even at that age, right, we were able to realize, okay, like, hey, okay, like we can make it work,
Mhm.
and it's the same way in the community, right? Like the church, you can't just expect like people to like make your life like
Mm.
better.
Mm.
It kind of goes both ways.
Mm.
If it's not there for you, like, you don't just like quit and try to find another community or different
Sure.
church, right? Like,
Sure.
it's like, hey, like I've always felt like, man, like you're here, like go for it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, don't just sit around and expect things to go well for anyone, right?
Sure.
Like, I didn't get to establish relationships from simply just sitting and waiting for people,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's not to like bash on those like kind of people like who just kind of sit, but like what do you expect?
Right. Right.
Like, so it's always just been, right? Like faith
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
deeds is dead, kind of like that idea of like, man, you gotta act like as a response.
Sure. So it's interesting because when you're talking about the youth, we kind of almost instill in them that they can expect someone to reach out to them because that is what we do for their ministries, right? So up through college, post college. So what do you think makes that distinction for students leaving college, leaving youth group, that would allow them to come to that understanding that, oh, there won't be these people there who, or I shouldn't expect for these people to be there. And maybe how did you come to your own conclusions that you need to make intentional efforts to make those relationships?
Yeah, I think I learned early on in the sense of like, I didn't really learn that as a student myself.
Sure.
But I think I learned seeing like serving the youth for a long time and
Hmm.
those kind of things. What I've seen is, um, I guess for lack of a better word, like entitlement, right? Like,
Sure.
and again, I'm not thinking of anyone specifically, but like, I think once we kind of like what you were saying of like, we give like so much and expect nothing in the sense of like investing in our community. Like if we just want to continue to just give and give and give, that's how people, burn out. That's how people, get
Hmm.
tired and
Hmm.
that goes both ways, right? That's why you don't see a lot of like teachers who last for a long time, but then also you don't see a lot of students like come back for a
Hmm.
long time either,
Hmm.
because it's just like this there's both just so much like
Hmm.
one-sided, right? Like you're either
Right.
giving too much or taking too much.
Sure.
And so just this idea of like, man, reciprocation and understanding, like again, that this aspect of community is the only real way to like sustain like going
Hmm.
forward, like and that's how I see it. Yeah,
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. So are you in a CG right now?
I am.
Okay.
I'm kind of in two.
Oh, kind of. Is it the youth
Yeah,
group one?
the youth group one,
And
and
then
then
the
I
Upper
have like an
Bridges?
Upper Bridges
Okay,
one.
okay.
So I show up when we have outings.
Hmm.
Does that count?
Yeah, it counts. It counts. It's community group, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I should know. I'm a CG leader, right? So, okay, so there's been you. Is this the first year you've been in a little bit, or have you been
Yeah,
in
it's
the?
been a first in a while.
Okay, yeah.
Again, there's a lot of like, for me, it's not an excuse per se. I think this is just an explanation of where I'm at. Like there's been a lot of things that have happened this year, whether it's work or personal,
Hmm.
that's kind of made it really difficult to sustain, from not doing it like other like aspects of like community.
Sure.
I think especially during the pandemic, I kind of like kept to myself and did my own thing. And, um, there was definitely a lack of accountability. There was definitely a
Mm.
lack of, um, just wisdom coming my way. And I
Sure.
think I missed that. And so this year has kind of been a little bit better in that regard of like, I think especially being a youth group teacher for so long, you always think like, I always felt like I have to be the one that like talks, or I have to
Hmm.
be the one that like makes things make sense. And those,
Sure.
there's always been that weird like burden.
Hmm.
But I think this year has helped in kind of, again, reciprocating, right? Like receiving and giving. And that balance has really helped, kind of, especially in the past like month or two, I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
more so than any other time, um, really helped with kind of centering, what this relationship with God would be like,
Sure.
right? Like
Sure.
it's, we could sit around and just wait for God to like provide and make life better. But,
Hmm.
if that were the case, like, what would even be the purpose, right?
Hmm.
Like, and
Hmm.
so, um, understanding that through this community has really helped, again, in my development. And I could say that honestly, just even the past like month and a half, like even more
Sure.
so. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you talk a lot about lessons learned, and I guess your short 25 years here on Earth. But I wanted to ask if you had any particular story, great story that you really saw God and God saw you through a certain time, maybe, and especially some lesson that you got from that experience.
Right. I think, I think for me, more than a specific story, I think, it's just the sustained like faithfulness through just what I remember CCPC
Sure.
as a youth group student
Hmm.
to what it is now. My life has not necessarily been like crazy up and down in any way. Um, but there's definitely been days and months and weeks and years where it's just been almost, in a sense, like in the desert.
Mm.
And yet, even being given the opportunity to serve in the youth
Hmm.
or be a part of a CG, or, even little things like that. When I look at it, even now, like I'm so thankful that like there aren't like those kind of rules and laws that make
Hmm.
me kind of pariahed or
Mm.
shunned in a sense,
Hmm.
and so I'm always, more than just a specific moment, it's just these random reminders of God's faithfulness. Like every time I'm reminded, like even in spite of who I am,
Right.
all the mistakes, all the different things that have occurred in my life, like there's always just moments where I'm like, okay, well, I have to like look at it, and I have to approach it in thankfulness, because if not, like
Hmm.
it's gonna,
Mm.
I, these moments, these good and bad moments, if I just look at it from my own perspective, like, like I'm gonna get tired. I'm gonna like get mad. I'm gonna get angry. And so it's just being reminded that I'm so thankful that I have these communities, like even,
Sure.
for me personally, right? Like having a conversation with someone, like I had a conversation with someone last week, and just, talking about accountability in my life,
Hmm.
and, those kind of moments, someone I've known for a long time, but, like we haven't really had a lot of like
Sure.
conversations. And
Yep.
even those moments, like I'm just like, man, like
Hmm.
I'm so thankful that I had this community, because, there were conversations that probably wouldn't have been like occurring from someone that I've kind of known for even 4 or 5 years, right? Like
Sure.
it's just the sustain. I've known him for like 20, 30 years. And yet, like, we were able to have these kind of conversations, because of this community. And,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
in those moments, I'm so thankful, like, that I'm still able to be here and be a part of this community, and that I have people who I can care for, but also care for
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
right? Like, and, so it's always just kind of being in a posture of thankfulness that
Sure.
these moments of grace are like even more beautiful,
Right.
right? And so, yeah, I look at these opportunities, you know, again, you can look at it in two different ways, right? You can look at it negatively or positively. And I think I'm just always constantly reminded to approach it positively, or else like it's just going to eat at you. And what good does that do?
Sure,
You know,
sure.
so
Yeah. I think one thing that strikes out to me about your story is just the consistency, not in necessarily specific people, but kind of in the community that you've been able to cultivate in CCPC, but just as Christians. And sorry, we have a CG plan, so but we're it's a little bit of interruption, but it's fine. But yeah, and just seeing how people have worked through in your life through all this time. So talking about your experience at Christ Central, I just want to ask if you have any, just what's your favorite memory you have at CCPC over the last 20x years? You know, any like fun moments you had? I guess it doesn't have to be your favorite, but just something that makes you laugh. You know, your experience with your friends, you know, Jane, Jay, all these people, Q, and, you know, and you know, you have so much time here. And it seems like you've enjoyed your time so at this point.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I can't think of a specific memory right
It's
off the
hard,
top
right,
of my
to just
head.
come
Yeah,
up these
like
these.
this was not a part of the
Yeah,
plan here.
I'll
But
send it to you next time.
um, man, that's a fun memory. I
Trip,
think
whiskey. I don't know.
like there's, man, that's tough. Like you know, everything's
I'll keep making fillers. Come on, you just.
yeah. Just like
I'll tell
give
a
me
joke.
examples. Yeah, give me
Oh,
examples of
man.
like what is your favorite memory?
My favorite memory of CCPC. Ooh, I really liked when it was I think it might have been Pastor Hank's goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
like dinner, or it was back at our old campus. We did like talent shows. I don't know if you remember those, but
Yeah.
my parents danced to Wonder Girls, or my dad did, and I still remember that. Yeah, or no, it was.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite memory.
Okay, good. And it's still ingrained in my head because there's a video on YouTube somewhere. So, and it was they're not very good.
You know, yeah, man, I know it sounds horrible. I really don't have memories like
Sure. Yeah.
but I would say like it's just like specific random moments.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that I'm just like happy to see someone, right? Like I'm so like I could think of like retreats,
Right.
you know,
Going
or
to Fogo de Chao with people.
yeah, or like
watch sports with
like,
people.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like it's
The
a
day-to-day.
collection of memories.
Sure.
And it sounds so lame, but like
No.
I really think like all those little moments add up to like one big memory, right?
Sure.
Like I'm just like reminded of like, you know, when we didn't have a pastor, right?
Mhm.
Like I still remember like that one dude from Vienna Presbyterian, like who came like every week.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember thinking like, man, what is going on
Yeah,
here?
what is
But at the same
what's
time, it's just
happening?
like those kind of memories like to now where we have
Right.
like established people in those positions
brings
now. It's
tenacity
like
a little bit,
pretty
right? Yeah.
crazy.
Mhm.
I remember, I don't remember who. I remember a pastor reciting Britney Spears lyrics during, you know, I think it was Lucky. And I remember thinking like, okay, like this
sure.
is
Yeah,
they're hip
yeah.
to it.
It's something,
This was, you know, in the mid 2000s. So
yeah,
they were,
I would
it wasn't
guess.
like last week, right? Like, so like why is that my memory?
Hey, it's a
But
good memory.
I remember
Hey,
thinking,
you remember the sermon over 20 years.
yeah, you know, I don't remember too much. I've had a lot of concussions in my life, but I remember even where I was when I started hearing Lucky, right? Like when he started singing saying the lyrics, I was like, oh my goodness.
Were you sitting in the balcony?
I'm in the balcony, like the first row of the balcony. Like
I remember those.
yeah,
distinctly.
exactly. Those, like, see, like even just getting there and sitting in those seats, like, and kind of, I remember we had a choir back then. Like, yeah, those little things kind of add up to like, man, like I have only good memories.
Yeah. So coming out to the end of our time, I wanted to ask what hopes you have for the futures of CCPC, of its members, of the church as a whole. How do you want to see us grow as a church?
Yeah, I mean, if I could connect it to like that Duke thing I was talking about, you know, I think continuing to adapt and continuing to kind of just understand like the community, understanding like where we at, and just I think having not like keeping it about the community, keeping it
Sure.
about, again, Christ centered versus like, like what kind of theatrics can we do? Like
Right.
what, like what kind of things are like modern churches
Right.
doing? Like, but to focus, really just continue to focus on like the mission, right? Like
Yeah.
to go and, like for me, I believe in that future in this church, right? And I still believe in that direction. And, in spite of all the changes that can occur, like I think having that makes me hopeful, right? Like I
Sure.
believe in the people that are placed here, that will be placed here. And going forward, like that's what keeps me going, right? Like I believe in like the leadership, right? More so because I believe in who the leadership believes in, right? And so for me, it's as long as we keep it about that, and what can you say, right?
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
so yeah.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate you sharing. Appreciate your wisdom in the years that you spent at Christ Central. I can't wait for the next 25 or so
Oh,
years. Yeah,
man.
we'll see what those look like, right? But
Oh,
yeah, thanks
man.
again for coming, Andy, for
Yeah.
this bonus episode. As after already talking for an hour about Duke, I appreciate it and hope you enjoyed your time. But yeah, see you guys next time.
Thank you.